Hello and welcome to the webinar. My name is Hannah Dyson from Enfield Voices and GlobalNet 21, and we'd like to introduce Heath Roselli to the webinar this afternoon. And the webinar is called The Portrait of Dr. J, Capturing the Humanity and Fragility Behind the Masks. And this is one of the regular webinars we do, exploring local, national and international issues, and also celebrating the achievements of people's inspirational work by telling their story. Today we are chatting to artist and art teacher Heath Roselli about how she had the idea at the beginning of the first lockdown that something needed to go on record in paint to reflect what was happening at the time. And Heath is going to talk us through this incredible journey of the creation of this beautiful and very emotive painting, Dr. J, and how this painting evolved into a message to get NHS staff to talk about their mental health.
Yeah, so thank you for agreeing to talk about your work and the painting, Dr. J, and welcome to the webinar. Can you briefly introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your background?
Well, I didn't go to art school. I only started painting when I spent about 28, and I'd been going to evening classes once a week, learning how to use oil paints, and it sort of grew from there. So that's a very long time ago because I'm 60 now. But anyway, I wanted to work from home because I had 2 small children at that point, and I was a single mother. So I decided I made a rash decision and decided to be an artist and try and earn a living, and we had practically nothing. But anyway, never mind. I worked like an apprentice in an artist's studio called David Denby for a bit. And then he moved on, and then I found a wonderful lady called Rosa who was able to teach me the things that I hadn't already learned. So I went to paint in Rosa's studio once a week for a very, very long time, and carried on with my commissions beside her with her help, which was really terrific. And anyway, so between commissions, I try to justify my existence by painting powerful messages about something maybe that I feel strongly about, and that's how Dr. J came about. Among others, there's a picture behind me, Evelyn, who that was all about breast cancer and mastectomy, and I've done several in between Evelyn and Dr. J, but they just happen. They evolve between commissions, really, portrait commissions.
So you're about sort of doing meaningful art that sort of tells a message,
with
tells
a strong
a story,
message. Something with a strong message, something that I care deeply about.
And take us back to, say, March 2020, when the world sort of changed and we went into lockdown, and you probably felt, all the different emotions. I think you've got a neighbour who is retired now from Addenbrooke. She was working in orthopedics, and did she give you the idea, or did you have that idea in your head?
Well,
to paint
it was something that had been going through my head, that we really needed to make a record of what was happening. And in fact, really at that point, we didn't actually know what was happening or how long it was going to go on for. We really had no idea. And I felt this is historical, this is a moment in time, and I want to show what it must be like, really, from the point of view of a patient being put on a ventilator. We were just learning that this is what was happening and they needed ventilators. And so my friend Joe, who lived across the road and has retired from Addenbrooke's, said, well, I think I can find you somebody at Addenbrooke's who will be able to help, and you can collaborate with them and get the information you need. So she did indeed do that, which was wonderful. And along came Dr. Johnston, who is a senior consultant in the ICU ward at Addenbrooke's, or one of the ICU wards. And he was delighted to help. So he sent me all the information and we talked, and he told me how things were. and sent me lots and lots of photographs from all around the ward of different things happening. And I was beginning to get an idea of what this painting should look like. Yeah.
Wow. So so did he, yeah, so did he, I guess, speak to all his colleagues in the ICU and say, you know, this is what we're doing, and maybe we can create, you know, a beautiful piece of artwork from this. We don't know how it will look yet, but this is what we're
nobody
thinking
really
doing.
knew how it was going to turn out.
No.
And I didn't. I never do. These things tend to have a mind of their own, really. And so they kind of evolve as whatever is going on in my head evolves.
But
so
I thought it's quite interesting the way originally you wanted to do it from the perspective of the patient, and when you look at the picture of Dr. J, you can see him looking at you, the viewer as
yes,
the patient.
The patient, that's
yeah.
right, exactly.
But
then things sort of tended to move on, and obviously the crisis got so bad, and I was picking up the desperation, you know, that was going on amongst the hospital staff, and I was picking up that, you know, they were really going to suffer from post-traumatic stress, and how awful it must be, and the incredible dedication, and they were just ploughing on no matter what, at their own sort of, to their own detriment, really, and obviously when probably they were going to need help as well. So the message began to be rather more for the staff and for doctors and nurses and any hospital staff. And Our Frontline is a charity that my daughter Emily put me in touch with at that point when I was thinking about these things. And she said, well, they are a helpline, and they are an amalgamation made up from Samaritans, Mind, the Royal Foundation of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, Hospice UK, Shout, various charities had all got together to create this helpline, which is texts and I suppose emails, it's whatever you want, a phone line, and it's 24 hours. So Our Frontline were very pleased to know what I was doing, and we sort of got together and agreed that this painting should promote them and have the message, Dr. Johnston's message, which is very powerful. It's okay to be okay, but it's okay not to be okay, and you must reach out. And here is who you must reach out to. Here is the help you need. So the painting is being reproduced on posters with the helpline details, and the painting itself has a message from Our Frontline sitting beside it.
That's amazing.
At the moment. Yeah.
Because I think sometimes as a healthcare worker, and when I say healthcare worker, I mean, like, you know, ambulance staff and social care and carers, they can sometimes be stoic, especially in this country. You know, you're taught to be stoic and get on with it, and I suppose the whole job is looking after others, and maybe the kind of, you know, Our Frontline and other charities helping them reminds them that actually they need to look after themselves, and, you know, can have ramifications for the future, and also their families as well. I think something I noticed was they were, you know, some of the healthcare workers during the first lockdown was scared of you know, maybe bringing home COVID to their families, or maybe getting ill, and what would that mean with for their families. Could you talk me through how you put together the pictures, the painting? So obviously you've already said Dr. Johnson, ITU consultant, sent you the photographs. Then what did you do once you had the photographs?
Well, then I sort of had a bit of a panic and thought, there are lots of photographs all taken in different places of lots of different people, and I need to try and put them into a space that makes some kind of a sense, and I've got to get, you know, the perspective right and decide what is important, what are the most important things out of all these hundreds and hundreds of photographs. And I decided the most important thing was Dr. Johnston, because, you know, he just came across with such a powerful expression on his face. And I mean, he sent me lots of photographs, but I found one that I felt expressed what I wanted the painting to express. So he is central and very big in the painting. And then in the distance, I wanted to show the dedication of what was going on in the woods. So there's a tiny little digital clock behind him, which probably nobody will notice, but it says 20 minutes past midnight. So this is going on. And I know, you know, that the photographs he took at that time, I think a patient had just died. And, you know, it was a quiet moment, one of the few quiet moments that he was able to help. And then the rest of the information, all different pictures. And I sort of decided, and then I drew them on little bits of paper and moved them about on the canvas. I did some very rough sketches on a rough old canvas.
And I noticed you've done that in sepia, is that right?
Sepia, yeah.
Sepia.
I usually start with raw sienna. This is the old master's technique, taught to me by David Denby and by Rosa, and it is a dying technique of painting that is not taught in art schools anymore because it's very slow, but it is a wonderful way of painting, and you can't really get that depth of colour or just resonance really unless you paint in layers. And so that's what I do. I start with raw sienna and do the underpainting in raw sienna once I got it designed, but I've been moving my little drawings around on the canvas first and deciding what was going to go where. So it was all a bit of a melting pot for some time.
Until you could get something that kind of summed up the experience, and obviously during your conversations with Dr. Johnson, you wanted something to reflect that. And
absolutely. And the more we talked over the months, I mean, I started really putting the brush to the canvas in May 2020, and I finished it in January 2021. There you are. There's the painting. You can see. Yeah,
brilliant. So, thank you, Frances, for putting that up. Yeah,
that is exactly what we need. So I can explain. One of the hardest things was painting the ventilator. Actually, that was extremely difficult, and I didn't exactly know what I was doing, so it's probably not totally accurate, but it was the best I could do. And the sign behind the doctor who's typing something in on a computer, behind her there's a notice, because according to Dr. Johnston, he said patients are very, very confused when they ventilator, and so they need to know where they are, what the date is, who's around, you know. So it's all written on a poster there. And then in the distance, you can see at the far left, there's a patient on a ventilator. And then behind that curtain, there's probably another one. But it was an invented space, I have to say. I've just put all these things together.
And I don't know why, but you can tell it's maybe at night or even like 3 in the morning. Because when I looked at it I've looked at this picture quite a few times, and when I look at it over and over again, then I started after a while to notice how maybe tired and maybe you know, the faces are really, really concentrating a lot, and you can see sort of how it sort of wears you down, the kind of months and months and months of having to overwork and the burden of what's happening. And I think you've really captured that very well.
Thank you. Well,
in their faces.
As the painting progressed, the expression on Dr. Johnston's face became more and more so, if you see what I mean. You know, the anxiety and the exhaustion it is just there in his eyes. It's his eyes. It's a very small amount of the canvas, but that's really the message. Is it written in his eyes?
I mean, you've made his eyes look quite sort of almost dry and quite sunken, and so you can see the relentlessness of the situation.
You can see the anxiety and the exhaustion. Yeah. And his, you know, he said that quite often when he put somebody on a ventilator, he knew that he was probably the last person they'd ever see in their life, because so many people didn't pull through at that point at the beginning. So, you know, he has to live with that, which is pretty awful. But, you know, and he's needed to reach out for help as well, as I'm sure they all do.
And I think if somebody senior like Dr. Johnson vocalizes that he needed to reach out, and he's he's not afraid of reaching out, and maybe once a week calling or talking or doing art, other more junior colleagues, like people who are maybe even 1 year into their training as doctors, nurses and allied health professionals, he's almost like leading the way. Need people who are more senior to lead the way by saying this is probably actually what we need to do as part of our profession, is seek help and make sure we keep talking, not bottling things up.
That's exactly it. And there is this help out there. That's really the point. So I feel the painting has grown really from what it was originally meant to do to what it is now. And I hope it'll tour around hospitals as well. So that would be good.
And so Dr. Johnson came to pick it up once you'd finished it. And
yes, he did. Because I'd never met him. I'd only spoken to him on the phone and emailed and text, because I felt guilty every time I tried to make contact, really, because he was so busy and so overwhelmed by what was going on. I thought the last thing he's going to want is me saying, what should the ventilator say? What should be on, what do these buttons do? And all this sort of stuff, because I felt I needed to understand it all in order to paint it. And I felt overcome with guilt just making contact with him. So he was very kind and very tolerant. But when he did come and pick up the painting, I looked at it and I thought, well, who's this? It didn't look the same as the photograph. But we had a very enjoyable time chatting in the garden, because that was all obviously we could do, and talking about it all. But I'm sure we will remain friends always. I have so much admiration for him, really.
Do you think? Yeah, do you think that you're special to him also? I mean, you've obviously done this painting, but do you think that idea of asking him to go and take hundreds of photos in the ITU and having like a little project to kind of focus on, do you think that might have helped get him through a little bit?
Well, I think it might have done. I mean, a bit of light relief is always good, and art is such a healing thing. I mean, art, whether you're painting or whether you're looking at art. And I think art can be very, very powerful as a healer, especially in hospitals.
Do you think that I know some hospitals have already started doing this after COVID, but do you think hospitals should have more kind of nice breakout space for the staff where they can have classical music? Because I know you sometimes teach art with classical music, and
I always do.
Your podcast. Do you think they should have some classical music in the breakout spaces for staff, and maybe some kind of colouring in on the tables, but maybe like sessions where you've got an art teacher saying, if anybody wants to join, an art session, we can do that.
Well, I know from my students' perspective, because I'm teaching on Zoom at the moment, obviously I have to do it that way, but whether they were coming here to the house, which they were before the lockdowns, or painting on Zoom, and you've got the classical music on it, the whole thing is a form of escape. The music it sort of kind of releases your mind a bit. Classical music much better, and Rosa always said this to me as well. Classical music is a wonderful release, and I think then you free up your mind and you start painting from your subconscious, and the rest of the world falls away. It's extraordinary. So
does maybe something to the brain and the breathing.
It does.
Of your
undoubtedly. Time disappears. Unfortunately, you suddenly remember this. You've got to get back to something else. But I would like to pay tribute to Rosa, because I would never have done any of this without her help. And she's painted for years for charities. And there's actually a wonderful book that's been written about her biography. It's just come out and been published, and it's called Rosa Branson, A Portrait, by a very good author called Lynn Michel. And it explains all about this process of painting, which enables us to paint things that are far more complicated than what other people can achieve painting wet on wet. It's much quicker painting wet on wet, but if you paint wet on dry and you paint in thin layers, you can do the most complicated things. Takes a long time, but you can do things that other methods you just can't do.
And you're talking about the old masters technique that you said that's you talk about the old masters technique as sort of part of the Renaissance period.
Yes.
And that's why maybe, and that's what you've applied to the Dr. Johnson painting as well.
That's what all my paintings, I wouldn't paint any other way. And in fact, Rosa and I have co-founded something called the Wellington Movement. Wellington is the name of the village where I live. But the Wellington Movement is a brainchild of Rosa and I, really. And it is to reach out to artists who've gone to art school but have never had the chance to learn how to paint properly, because at art schools they don't teach you how to paint anymore. Not really. They don't teach any of the classical things anymore. Everything is becoming virtual or conceptual, but the real skills are not being taught. So the Wellington Movement has been created to help people who actually want to learn, and we can help them from a distance. And Rosa has people coming to her studio, well, she used to, but now of course she can't because of lockdown, but they'll come back again. I mean, many of us owe her an enormous debt of gratitude for what she's taught us.
And do you know why did Rosa become an artist? Do you know the story behind that at all?
Well, yes, I do. It's a very sad story. Her father was a very well-known artist, and some of his paintings are in the Tate. He was called Clive Branson, but he was killed in the war when Rosa was 9, and she was at a farm school during the war, because, you know, she'd been sent out of London to school, like that's what they did. And she was only 9 when her father died, and he had promised her that when he came back from the war he would teach her to be an artist, and teach her to paint most beautifully. And of course he never came back. And you know, she was always determined to learn. So she went to the Slade, but she didn't learn anything. Even then, she said she did. So she had to go to the National Gallery and learn to paint. She was taken under the wing of the chief restorer at the National Gallery, and he taught her about the old master's technique and how you do the underpainting, and then you apply glazes and layers of paint until you get this lovely effect. And she has made it her mission to pass it on, and I've made it my mission to pass it on as well. So it doesn't die. Yeah.
So she has basically taught you all her amazing skills.
Yes, she's passed it on. Rather like an old master teaches an apprentice, like Michelangelo taught his apprentices. Same thing.
That's amazing to think that you in turn you're passing on to your students.
Yes, exactly that. So that we've all bypassed the art schools.
Just shows, doesn't it?
But if you want to read the full story, it's in this marvelous book, Rosa Branson, A Portrait, and it's for sale on Amazon. It's a very interesting read because it just tells of the battle Rosa had to fight when she was told that, you know, people shouldn't paint this way. So the art schools just don't, you know, and I think the tutors now probably don't know how to do it either.
Probably because it takes a lot of effort and skill.
It's not commercial.
No,
because it's so slow.
And I read that Rosa Branson gets up at 5 in the morning. She'll paint nowadays from 9 till 5. So she's got a big work ethic.
Well, she's 88 and she's still doing it. And she is framing her own 8-foot by 5-foot paintings. She's got a framing studio in her basement, and she takes these enormous canvases down there by herself and frames them. It's terrific. Wow. It's absolutely mind-blowing. Yes.
Inspirational. And what did she say when you were telling her about your Dr. J painting? Did she give you lots of encouragement and tips?
Well, she did. I mean, in between the lockdowns, I took it to her studio and I sat there and we talked about it because, you know, she's always full of ideas, and she said, oh, you might want to tweak this here or tweak that there. And it was very good to have her advice. I mean, the more you learn about something like this, the more you realize there is to learn. It's a massive subject.
Which part of the painting did you change from her suggestions? Do you remember?
Oh, I can't remember. Really can't
Okay, I
remember.
just wondered. There's so many different. And the other thing, yeah, and does she also tell you about does she also teach you about the montage element of your paintings? Because I know you obviously
Yes.
you've got the old masters techniques, but I noticed both of you have in common the fact that you do montage. So obviously,
Yes.
I think, yeah, some of your other paintings, not the two in the background, but some of your other paintings, including Dr. J, you've got the different elements.
She taught me all about that. She taught me about drawing little pictures on bits of paper and moving them around like a collage. And you can, stick them onto the canvas in different places and see what they look like, which is the way of getting the design. She taught me most of what I know about designing something like that. All of what I know about designing something like that, because it's so complicated. I'm doing something at the moment for a charity that trains ex-offenders to be gardeners. and I've got a lot of people in that, and I've got photographs taken different places, different times, different distances, and I'm doing just that. I'm sort of arranging them, I'm at a stage where I'm trying to decide who's going where to make a good design.
That's amazing.
So I'm sticking them on with bits of paper and moving them around. Yes.
And obviously, so you're in the process of doing that project now, and then what's going to happen to the painting when that's finished? Where's it going to go?
Well, I'm not quite sure. It will go on exhibition around a few places because it needs to promote that charity, which is a very good charity, which is based in Thetford, which is near us. And it is such it's THIS. I think the horticultural scheme is part of it, but I can't remember what the other words are in the THIS. But it's helping ex-offenders and people who are at risk of offending to actually get a profession and learn a skill and garden and get fresh air and get exercise, makes them feel better. It's all together a brilliant thing. So that's what I'm trying to portray in that one.
It's amazing the way art can almost speak 1,000 words. You don't have to do all the explaining. You can do the explaining through the picture.
Art, poetry, and music. 3 things that can get powerful messages across. And I like to feel that some of my paintings could do that. Yeah.
And with the Dr. J, back to the Dr. J painting, so it's obviously, is it still in the outpatients department at Addenbrooke's?
It's at the main entrance of Addenbrooke's, apparently.
Okay.
So everybody who comes in, apparently if they come in the front door and turn left towards outpatients, and I don't know because I haven't been there. Thankfully, I'm healthy enough not to have to. But it's there, and it's a lot of people are looking at it, and then it will go, I expect, to the West Suffolk Hospital next, and we'll find hospitals as we go along. But it needs to get out there and do its work, really.
Because I think it would be a good idea if maybe other artists as well, or even, I don't know, children in schools paint some pictures, or artists in art schools paint pictures for the hospitals, a bit like, obviously they wouldn't do it to your standard, but for hospitals, so they can sort of send a message, be respectful to staff, where if staff ask you to wear, your PPE, make sure you do that, don't make their life more difficult, and also, as you say, about the mental health element of trying to cope with everything they've gone through. So it says to the public, these people are such amazing skilled people, and they work so hard, and they've got incredible caring natures and all these different elements, but you can
all
have
these
that
different messages. They can all go into the same painting if you want them to. I mean, I know a lot of people were painting at the outset. A lot of other artists did paint it, but they were mainly smiling, reassuring paintings of caring doctors and staff. Mine was a little bit more serious, but I just felt this became a very serious thing as I was going along. I never know how a painting's going to turn out. I really don't, until it sort of moves along, it evolves as whatever's going through my head evolves, really.
It sounds like, you've obviously got a talent to sort of capture how people are feeling, and you probably helped the fact that you had all those conversations with Dr. Johnson, and he sent he sent you a lot of photos, not just sort of 10 or something. He's also
No,
sent you a lot
lots
of
and
photos.
Lots to choose
really...
from. Lots and lots to choose from.
Yeah.
But you know, some of the pictures of all the machines, it was really in actuality far more complicated. There were wires and tubes and cables and bottles absolutely everywhere. But I couldn't physically paint all that, so I had to leave some of it out. It wasn't possible. So in actual fact, what you would really see is a lot busier than what's in the painting. But it was just humanly impossible to make it into a work of art if I put all that in, and I'd still be painting it now.
and that's part of the skill as well, as sort of selecting which bits you're going to put in, and
yes, you have to
creating something. If people are interested in getting in touch with you about advice, about the charities you mentioned, or even about maybe starting their own journey into art, or maybe painting their own picture of how they've seen lockdown as a healthcare worker or an ambulance worker or a social worker, how could they get in touch with you?
Well, through the Wellington Movement website, or my own website, which is my own website is heathroselli.co.uk. So that's got all my contact details. Also, the Wellington Movement website is really to help other artists. It's a sort of platform where we can all help each other if you want to paint in this manner, and we can feed off each other, because being an artist is like being in an ivory tower. You shut yourself away, and you know, sometimes you feel, gosh, I'm all alone here. But if you want to paint this way and you're feeling like that, then have a look at the Wellington Movement. You'll find other artists all on there with their paintings, and we can all talk to each other and contact each other, help each other, because I think that's what we should be doing, not trying to compete with each other. We should be helping each other.
Definitely. I really agree with that one. I really do. And thank you very much for speaking to me, about your work and this amazing project, and talking us through. Thank you very much.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.